world. So one thing I would like to do, I see that there's sort of a sunny area in the image. So I want that sun to match what the other sun was doing. I grab the mental ray IBL and I can now rotate that thing. So I'm going to rotate in negative Y and let's see, negative 90. And that should hopefully get the sun pointing into the front of my warehouse, just like the other image was. There's one other thing I noticed. I do see some text there. I actually painted some text to see if it would show up backwards. Now I'm looking at it. It is the word backwards, and yes, it is showing up backwards. Now if I go outside the sphere and I look at this thing, I see that it's showing up forward. So that definitely proves that it's going to be backwards in my render. I can see that if I hit render here and the text shows up forward, I know I'm having a little trouble. So what happens is when you put a texture onto a sphere, it needs to be. There was just one little switch I could do inside of Maya, but there is not. So keep in mind that negative scaling of the sphere doesn't really work. So you're much better off in Nuke going to that texture and flipping it. So we see the text right there. It looks fine, but that means that it's backward in reality. We don't want to see it forward in a mirror. So what I'm going to do is save that render, go to my mental ray, and I'll bring in text with a flip. So that one, you can see it flipped in the interface, which is helpful. That stuff, I'm sure it'll become more common in the future. One other thing I do notice here is that I don't have that nice big directional push from the sun that my previous renders were getting. That is because this guy had a directional light and the sky. So when I use an HDR image, the fact is I usually do need some direct lighting to go with my final gather. I'm going to do create a light, directional light, and I'm going to move that thing to the exact spot of where the image of a sun is on my image. So I'm going to slide it over, push it up, and if I could get that thing to rest basically where the sun is. If you use the manipulator tools, you'll get a constraining tool, so that makes it easier. I'll zoom in. Alright, so now it's in the basic direction of my sun on the image. If I had other sources of light, like when you're doing an interior scene, you might have 3 or 4 sources of light. It is very common to place a light there at each one. Now I'm going to make shadows for this thing. Ray trace shadows, of course. Never depth map shadows. This light angle would be the shadow softness. Because it's a sun, I'm going to leave it to be hard shadows. And once you do introduce shadow softness, by turning this to a value of 1, you will have to do a quality of softness. This usually goes up to 24, 36, pretty high. It slows you down. So no shadows is great. Okay, I'm going to save this and do a render. So now we have a combination of direct illumination and indirect illumination. That's final gather plus my strong sunlight. Keep in mind, a sunlight does not have fall off, so it travels. The intensity does not fall off as it travels from the distance of the sun. Unlike the area lights that we used earlier, where we had to make a quadratic fall off. All right, I'm going to continue. All right, I'm going to continue where we left off, and this lesson is image-based lighting.